Life is like a spiral, constantly spiraling up in a repetitive nature, always going the same direction. And some choose to figure out what is the true meaning of this spiral. Why do we do such things every day? Is there true meaning in why we are here? That is some questions some people have brought up quite a lot in our time. And that is the main concept and theme of Kara no Kyoukai Movie 5 Paradox Spiral. Now, it's been quite a long time since I've actually sat down and done a review for Kara no Kyoukai, and I think it's been about a month and a half or so since I've actually done a review of Kara no Kyoukai, and I finally sat down to watch this movie. I just finished it about probably an hour and a half, 2 hours ago. I had to rewatch it again just to make sure I understood everything. And out of all the things I have seen from this series thus far, this by far is one of the best movies because of the way the narrative ties in with all the other movies that we have seen to this very point. Like, all the different plot lines, different things we have seen from the other movies, the past 4 movies, were kind of tied in with this movie, A Paradox Spiral. And the main point of this movie is kind of figuring out the value of meaningless death, or meaningless things that happen in daily life. And that is one of the main things that I really loved about this movie. Because you really, at first glance, when you watch this movie, you will miss a lot. You will really miss the main scope and picture of this movie, Paradox Spiral, and I'm willing to bet you right now, I missed quite a few things still after rewatching it again. So if some of my things are slightly inaccurate, I guess I'm inaccurate, but I mean, I'm just going to state my interpretation of how I look at this movie of Kara no Kyoukai. So, the main concepts, or the main themes of this is the spiral. The spiral of origin, or you have to where yin and yang, spirals, just spirals. That is one of the main things when it comes to the symbolism, and there's mainly 4 things from this movie you can take that actually references the title. Now, there's some easy ones, and then there's some very subtle meanings or symbolism towards the title of this movie. So let's point out the easy ones first. Obviously, the building, the main apartment building that majority of this movie takes place, is used as symbolism because of the elevator that is a spiral, or the building being a spiral shape. That right there is used to reference Paradox Spiral. But there's even more meanings if you think about this spiral. Yin and yang, this is one that really stood out to me when it came to this movie. Yin and yang was a used concept in this movie, and it was constantly shown with different pictures, especially with the knife to the cigarette pack and different things like that. Yin and yang was one of the main things that kept popping up, reoccurring in the movie, and you come to find out it actually plays a huge role with the ending conclusion of Paradox Spiral. So let's just dive into what yin and yang really meant when it came to this movie. So yin and yang, as we know, everybody probably in some form or time in their life has heard about yin and yang. Yin and yang represents light, dark. It can represent man and woman. It could represent anything, pretty much, that, is the opposites of each other. And if you look at yin and yang symbol, you will have these little circles on each side. For instance, if you have the white side, like the light side, you will see a little black dot in the white side. And that stands for the contradiction or similarities to the other side. And that right there is just so mind-blowing. It blew my mind when I started thinking about some things with this movie and how it was used when it came to the narration of the story. Because you had it to where it was actually kind of giving development to Shiki as a character too. Because the male version of Shiki to the female version of Shiki, the 2 personalities or the 2 souls that I covered in my last review, that's kind of how you can look at the yin and yang, the contradictions. But I personally believe that the yin and yang that was used in this movie, the main things it tried to represent was the conflict between Alba and Toko, and it was also to show the sexuality of Shiki. And then even more onto that, it kind of shows the ending conclusion of the movie when you see Shiki and then Tomoe walking their separate paths, and you see the similarities between them. When you first glance at that scene, it looks like it's a bunch of what the fuck is going on. But if you look at the kimono Shiki has on, it is the male version, a red kimono. And when I saw that scene, I'm like, are you trying to let me know that this is the afterlife? It's like the Mel, Shiki, and then Tomoe go their own separate paths. And the reason why I think that it was that was not just because it was the red kimono with Shiki and walking their separate paths and the similarities, but if you look at it in the movie, I noticed there was something very strange when it came to the names of our characters. For instance, Tomoe, one of the main iconic or main male characters of this movie of Kara Kyoukai, he played one of the main spotlights and the main support characters of the movie, and you can kind of consider him the main male character of this movie. Tomoe's name could actually be considered a girl's name or a female's name. And the way, Japanese is, some names could be more feminine than others. And the way Shiki was talking in this movie, she was talking with a male tone. And it was noticed at the beginning of the movie that maybe Shiki was using this tone of, voice, the way she was talking, to kind of show some respect to her previous self, the person that died, her other personality that died in the previous movie. And so she was using a male type wording, the way she spoke in Japanese. And Tomoe being kind of similar to a girl's name, it kind of represents the yin and yang at the end of the movie when you saw them go their own separate parts. Because if that was the male Shiki, the male personality Shiki with the red kimono walking away, and when you saw Tomoe walking away, it kind of fits, because Tomoe is like similar to a female name. Like, it's a female name, and with the contradictions with the dots in each side of the yin and yang, you see the similarities in each other. Because Tomoe, even though he's a male outside appearance, he had a girl type, name. And that was part of the contradictions of the yin and yang. And then Shiki also has this male personality that has some contradictions. The female personality that has contradictions because some parts a male inside of her. And so to see that, I'm like, whoa, it blew my mind seeing that type of narrative in this movie. But let's get into the real aspects and the main points of the movie. So, one thing I want to point out when it came to this is our villain. Our main villain reminded me so much of Kotomina Kirei. I mean, the similarities were there. It was very, very obvious it was. It was just so similar. It was. But that's not the main point I want to focus on. The main point I do want to focus on is the true motive behind our main villain of this movie. It makes him a very compelling villain that really shook me up. It really shook me up from seeing this dude's motive and what he truly wanted to accomplish. And it really goes to play with the main point of the movie, and it's very ironic the way his motive was done. So, the main point is this counterforce. This counterforce was constantly mentioned in this movie. And coming into this movie at first glance, I didn't really understand 100% what the counterforce was until I started looking at the scenes again. The counterforce is represented as karmic justice. That's how you can look at the counterforce. And from what you understand from the movie is the counterforce came through in Tomoe. Tomoe was the counterforce of the movie, and it served to go against what our main villain wanted to do. And so also, he couldn't have foreseen that because he didn't have all the knowledge from the spiral of origin, what he was trying to discover, what he was trying to know, the meaning of. And to see that, it's very ironic, but it plays an even bigger role when you think about it, because seeing how this dude, the main villain, figure out, where the spiral of origin was, and figure out the meaning of life, or the origin of life, and stuff like that, and meaning behind meaningless deaths, it was kind of ironic when he continued through his motivation, he lost track of his original motive. And that plays a huge role in the title of the series, and the meaning behind the movie. The main villain lost track or forgot his own original motive, and he only cared for that goal. And that right there, I was like, whoa, it blew me aback when I saw that, because to see how the writers, I don't know who wrote this series, but whoever wrote this series did a really good job and went into some very heavy and deep stuff. And it blows my mind to see how someone can really write stuff like this. I mean, I know these movies are based off of a book or a visual novel or something like that. I'm willing to bet they're based off of something like that. And I'm willing to bet, being as if it's a movie, it's probably dubbed down, actually. I'm willing to bet a lot of the narration and probably information that might be in the original adaptation, maybe the light novel, book, manga, whatever, might be dubbed down. Like, this is dubbed down compared to the true version, and we didn't get the full picture. But to be able to witness all this meaning in this movie, even if it might be dubbed down, it's just like, my God. It really is like, oh. So, one thing though, let's get into the factor of Toko. Toko's puppet. That right there is what really threw me off when it came to this movie. And then looking at the movie again on my second watch, I started realizing the reoccurring themes taking place, as I've already covered in this review. Toko, when she first comes in and walks into the spiral building, and she fights, Kotomi Kire, pretty much, she dies. And it was a very, very, very gruesome death. Like, oh my God, I was just flabbergasted when I saw the carnage, the head ripped off, the way, the eye, all that, just like very brutal. It was a very brutal way to die. And to see how she died and then came back, it left me confused. I'm like, is this just used as a plot device to bring her back? Because from what we find out in the movie is that Toko has another puppet. She's like a puppet magic user. And this puppet she made in the past is something that is equal to herself. Like, it's completely equal, and it's not stronger than her, it's not weaker than her, they're completely identical. And even if, like, the real Toko was to die, if that was the real Toko that died at the beginning, like the first Toko that walked in and died, if that was the real Toko, she's not necessarily dead because it doesn't matter. The fake Toko is the real Toko too, because they're identical. They're completely identical. And there's different ways you can take this, because in that meaning of her death and then coming back, it kind of devalues or dilutes the main concept of her death, or the main feels you would get from the death. Because when I was watching the movie and I saw her die brutally, in a brutal fashion, and I'm like, oh my God, this is so fucked up, and then she comes back and it's like, oh, I'm alive. At first glance, you're like, then that death was meaningless. Like, it was completely meaningless and used as a plot device. But there is when the real theme of the movie starts taking place. And that is when this movie yeah, it destroyed my mind then. Like, my mind was done. I'm like, oh my God. The main concept, as I said earlier on in the review, is our main villain trying to find out meaning in meaninglessness. The meaningless deaths. Trying to find the origin of meaning, pretty much, or the origin of what meaning really is, or try to find origin in different things. And to see how it kind of evolved into where Toko's death was meaningless because she went into another body, that plays a huge role with the true aspect of meaningless death. What our main villain is trying to hunt down, trying to figure out how he can make meaningless deaths meaningful. And I have to say, I love that concept so much. I really do. It really, really makes me enjoy this movie series so much more, just seeing how that was used. And overall, the movie was a very, very good, well-adapted, well-done movie. I couldn't ask for more when it came to the way this movie was done. I don't know if I'm expressing it enough to you. I'm trying to really go in deep when it comes to this movie, because this movie has so much meaning. Like I said at the beginning of the review, I know I have probably missed a lot of details when it comes to this movie. I probably have. And that's scary, because this movie is just so deep. I'm willing to bet I could watch this 7 times and still find more meaning. That's very ironic if you think about it. Find more meaning in this movie, even though the main quest of the movie is trying to figure out meaninglessness and meaning. So yeah, very ironic. That right there too is another excellent point when it comes to this movie. You can watch this multiple more times and still try to find meaning of what the movie really meant. Huh. Excellent. That truly is excellent. And I think that pretty much tops off the meaning of this movie. So yeah, animation-wise, very good. It's a very well-executed movie when it came to the animation. The art style was standard Ufotable. If you like Ufotable's art style, you're going to love that. Music, very atmospheric, as always, when it comes to this series in general. And the way it, hyped up some of these scenes, especially these darker moments, I think it did a good job. Now, overall, if I was to rate this movie, I would give it, I would say a 9.5 out of 10. Yeah, I'd probably give this movie a 9.5 out of 10, because I know there's even more meaning that I'm missing from the movie, and that's scary as fuck. So yeah, I want to say 9.5 out of 10. Camera angles, animation, everything was just very stellar. So yeah, tell me your thoughts in the comments below. What is your outlook on this movie? Tell me your thoughts. And if I got anything wrong, let me know, because this movie is very metaphorical. It's a very metaphorical movie, and it's mainly meant to just reference all these different, I guess, philosophical questions that we all wonder in our daily lives. So tell me your thoughts. You all have a wonderful day or night wherever you live. Please be safe. Chibi out.